All right, hello everyone, and welcome to LP's Fantasy Show. I am Dagan LP, the host of this show. If you are here listening, thank you for listening. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. Why am I here? I'm simply here to record my own thoughts and opinions and my process in regards to fantasy football, and sometimes just anything football related. Um, to better my abilities as a fantasy footballer. Sounds stupid. Um, but I mostly just kind of get some ideas down that come to my brain. And it's been a minute since I've recorded, but a few ideas have come to my brain, including something I think I'm going to call hinge point drafting or hinge point players. The Puppy 2, but Superflex has officially filled, unfortunately. I did get a ton of drafts in, though, especially on the last day. It really filled so fast. I didn't live record any of those drafts because I don't know. I feel like it can just kind of take a while, and I'm not sure someone really wants to listen to me drafting all of the time. I think every now and then it's okay, but for now, I think I was just doing a little bit too much. But I got a ton of Puppy 2 drafts in. I think I've got drafts completed. We got 7. Oh no, I'm sorry, 5. Nope, that's wrong. Good Lord. Here, this is what I want. We got, oh, this is wrong. This is an old page. Hold, please. We got, yeah, okay, 7. We got 7 drafts in. Not a ton. I really wish I did more. But after my last deposit, I think I depleted pretty well. Just got kind of busy with school and everything. So the Puppy 2 is closed, and so my thoughts around certain players and stuff, we're kind of hitting a standstill a little bit, I think, in terms of the fantasy football season. Home leagues haven't quite started yet, but I think, at least mine is starting to ramp up a little bit. And best ball, I think, is starting to get a little bit, at least for myself, overdone. I think it'll pick back up more here in a minute. But I'd like to talk about something somewhat fantasy related, but I mentioned I would do this in other videos, kind of just addressing and assessing teams as a whole and my expectations for them coming into the season. I wasn't sure how I was going to do that, whether I go division by division, or uh, rank the teams in terms of my favorite fantasy assets to own. But today I'm going to start with kind of bad teams that I think are going to be better than other people think, that I think will be better than expected, at least in terms of fantasy. I think there could be some success in terms of win-loss records and performance on the field. I mean, I think if I believe that they'll be better for fantasy, that there will be some better performance on the field, but less about win-loss records and winning success, and more about how they're going to translate to fantasy football and fantasy football success for us. So I'm using Our Lads here today. If you've never used Our Lads, it's a great resource for draft information. The depth charts are really reliable and have been for a very long time. So I'm going to be kind of looking at the depth charts here today, as well as maybe some ADP prices per team, and kind of just go over why I think these teams are going to be better than expected. A reverse way of saying that is why I think people think this team is going to be bad and why that's wrong. So I'm going to start with I'm going to go in order of how much disdain for the team there is from the general populace. And so let's start with the Detroit Lions. I think for those of us that pay attention to football, there's a lot of hype around the Detroit Lions, just within that circle. I think to the general populace, and the general fan, and the quote unquote normal fantasy football player, the Lions are still the Lions. They still have Jared Goff as their starting quarterback. But this team, over a couple of years now, has really, really added some good pieces. Jared Goff is the starting quarterback. I get it. Is he the worst quarterback in the league? No, I don't think so. Is he a top 15 quarterback in the league? I think some people would put him in the 15 to 20ish range. And I kind of get that. This offensive line is really, really good. They've added Jamison Williams on top of Amon-Ra St. Brown. They bring in DJ Shark. They have TJ Hawkinson. They have DeAndre Swift. They bring in Jamal Williams. There's weapons in this offense. Obviously, Jamison Williams has the torn ACL. He hasn't come back all the way. But once this offense is full, this team could do some damage. I'm not saying they're going to light the world on fire, but this offensive line is legit. I look forward every year to reading articles from Brandon Thorne. I think he has a Substack, but he also works for ETR. He's well respected offensive line evaluator. I'm almost confident the Lions are going to be in the top 10 in offensive line. If I see things similarly, I'm not a film guy. But just based off of, things I'm reading about individual players and how things are kind of adding up, the five as a whole, and, I've been paying attention to offensive line play for a few years now. So I think the Lions are going to be a top 10 offensive line once Brandon Thorne releases his offensive line rankings at Establish the Run. Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of went off for a piece there. DJ Shark, if he's healthy, I'm not expecting a lot, but could fit that offense well. And Jamison is the X factor. DeAndre Swift, they got guys that they've taken in the first round, right? Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker, those are older first round picks. But recently, Penei Sewell, TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift was almost a first round pick, but was taken in the beginning of the second. Jamison Williams, there are weapons to work with in this offense. And if there's any weakness, there's definitely a weakness to this Detroit Lions team. Don't get me wrong. I think they're probably going to be the third best win-loss record-wise in the division, behind the Vikings and then the Packers. But this defense, mainly because this defense is not as put together as the offense is, but that's what we want in fantasy football, right? We want an offense that may, I think could be a top 15 offense if things really broke right. That's probably pretty high, but they could be a good enough offense where if the defense is really that bad, you could really be taking advantage of the misconception that this is just the Lions. Now, I'll say there is some hype around the Lions. I'm not the only person kind of on this train. They're the favorite of the bad teams to be good, to kind of take a step. And I understand why. I see it. So I'm kind of, okay with drafting Lions players, especially at the ADP prices. If we go in, let's look at rankings here. Nope. If we go in Detroit, DeAndre Swift is a little bit rich for me. And I think that's mainly because he's a pass catcher. And we're chasing that pass catching upside with running backs a lot, and I get it. But TJ Hawkinson has been really falling. I don't have a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown, but and Jamison Williams is pretty low because of the ACL. But if Hawkinson and Amon-Ra and DeAndre Swift are this high, Jared Goff's ADP is so low. He's almost free, at least in single quarterback leagues. So like I said, I'm not jumping through the roof for the Detroit Lions, but I get why the hype is there. Now let's move on to both the New York teams. I'll kind of talk about both of them here. To summarize the Lions there, I think people just assume it's the Lions. At least I think this is going to be more true in your home leagues and more your sharper leagues. I don't think the Lions are going to be that great of a value. But in your home leagues, I think we could see some prices fall for those guys in the Detroit Lions offense. So I think it's just a perception that it's the Lions. Moving on to the Giants. This is a team that I have not believed in for a while. I thought Joe Judge, coming from the Belichick tree, no Belichick disciple has really been successful, but I thought, maybe he could be a a Tomlin kind of coach, um, where he can inspire. You know, that's such a lame thing to say. To be a Mike Tomlin, you're I mean, you're one of the best coaches of all time. So that's high expectations. Because Mike Tomlin is so great at so many things. Um, so I just thought he'd be. I don't know. I wasn't shocked that it didn't work out with Joe Judge. But now comes in Brian Dable, and I do believe in a little bit in Brian Dable, especially because he was so successful with the Bills, and you could make an argument, well, it's the players they had. Well, I don't know. The Bills have been right about a lot of things. They've been kind of checking all of the boxes everywhere, and it's not a shock to me that they have, one of the better offensive coordinators in the league in Brian Dable. So him coming to the Giants here, along with Wink Martindale, who was the defensive coordinator from the Ravens, I do think this coaching staff is vastly improved. And most importantly, I think this offensive line has improved. Daniel Jones is kind of a joke, in the perception of the people, and I get that. He's definitely had some lowlights, but I also don't think there was a lot working for him. Yeah, they had the weapons who we've now discovered are not as good as we always thought they were. At least each season coming in, they were never as good as we thought they were. And the offensive line has never been good. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle to perceive, how important offensive line play actually is. But that's changed here in 2022. This offseason, they reconfigured this interior offensive line. I don't think it's anybody that really jumps out at you, but at least it's something. Robert Mays and Nate Tice from the Athletic podcast, they talk about the difference, like just even an average offensive line makes versus like a really bad one. And like the better offensive line you get, like I just feel like there's a compounding effect with each, if you were to look at the effect that Brandon Thorne's rankings, if you rank those offensive lines and how much of an effect they have, positive or negative on the offense, I think it's a compounding effect the higher you get, and even equally so the lower you get, just in reverse in the negative aspect. But they go and draft Evan Neal in the first round. The guy they took before they took Kayvon Thibodeau. And Evan Neal, I think, was worthy of being the number one overall pick. An unreal player, unreal prospect. If he can slide in right at right tackle, this offense, I think, could make some noise. I think Daniel Jones is well supported. I've talked about how I love Saquon. He's the best player on the offense. This is going to sound shocking, but I think Evan Neal is the second best player on the offense. That's how good I think Evan Neal is. Or maybe that's how bad I think this offense is. Well, Kenny Golladay, I think, could do something if Kadarius Toney is healthy. All of a sudden, these weapons do, they don't necessarily make you feel good inside. But there's a glimmer of light there. And I think most importantly, with a change in scheme, with Brian Dable coming in, I think that this could really support these offensive players. I'm not necessarily buying any of Kenny Golladay or Kadarius Toney. They're cheap though. Like, you want to talk, like, they're even cheaper than what the Lions were. There's not a lot of hope with the Giants offense. Saquon Barkley is going as the RB10, and that's risen over the last couple of months. But I think that's due more to the idea, due to the fact of RB thirst, drafters wanting more RBs and understanding that the upside with Saquon Barkley is just outrageous. He should be the RB5 probably. But this offense is very cheap. The next player doesn't go until the 8th round, maybe the 9th. Kenny Golladay is going late. Daniel Jones is going late. I get that there's not a lot there, but that's kind of why we're talking about this here a little bit. I think they just could be successful with this scheme change, with this coaching change. And I think there's some glimmer there, some hope. And even I think the defense could even still be good. The defense was pretty good last year and the year before under Patrick Graham. I think there's definitely some promise there. You know, they just added Kayvon Thibodeau along with a slew of other guys. Um, and so, you know, I feel pretty good about this offense uh, in comparison to what I think the general public thinks of it. Once again, I don't think they're going to be anything fantastic in terms of the win-loss records. If they ended up being the fourth seed in the NFC East, it would not shock me even in the slightest. But I do think there is something there to this offense. Next, I want to talk about the New York Jets. I've talked about the New York Jets before. They were one of my favorite stacks coming into the offseason. I made that video before the schedule came out, and we'll talk about that here at the end, but I would just want to talk about why I believe in the Jets first. The Jets, I think, get a bad rap because they are the Jets, but most importantly, and this might be the most important component of this whole analysis, Zach Wilson is perceived to be very bad. And on the one hand, I'm ready to believe it because even when the offense is bad, you kind of see these quarterbacks who play and they're just not good. And you can kind of see that, you know, like even though it's bad around them, you kind of go like, man, we're not really sure if it would matter if they were right. I do, as I say that though, I'm thinking in my head that just maybe we're misperceiving still because we're seeing what it's like now, but we think the upside or the positive side is lower than probably what it actually is. So let me explain why I think the Jets are going to be good. They've been killing it in the front office for the last couple of years. The weapons on this team, plus the offensive line that they've retooled, Zach Wilson is easily the most set up to succeed of all of the year two quarterbacks, and it's not even close. This analysis here, it shouldn't rely heavily on one player, but if Mekhi Becton is on the field and he is what he was drafted to be, this team is going to be, I think, very sneaky, and I'll say why sneaky rather than dangerously good. This is the best case scenario for Zach Wilson. Last year, it was okay. I don't think Corey Davis is a wide receiver 1. I barely think he's a wide receiver 2. This offensive line was not good. Mekhi Becton was hurt. Tevin Coleman was the starting running back. I don't even remember who the starting tight end was. It was bad. Move to this year. Elijah Moore has ascended as expected. The Jets in the offseason retool and upgrade this offensive line with Laken Tomlinson from San Francisco, as well as the additions they've made in last year's draft. They had 2 first-round picks last year. They went and got Zach Wilson, then they traded up to get Elijah Vera Tucker, who was by far and away the number 1 guard in the class. Also thought of as possibly an offensive tackle. It looks like they've got Connor McGovern from Denver. They picked up Dan Feeney from the Chargers, Nate Herbig from the Eagles. They've gotten depth into this offensive line, and they've gotten top-end talent. Then you get to the weapons. A duo of Elijah Moore and Corey Davis sounds great. A trio with Garrett Wilson sounds legit. Corey Davis, I guess I might have a tiny blind spot for. I don't think he's like all that great, but he does bring something, and he's the wide receiver 3. He brings incredible size. You know, he's been a wide receiver 1. He's performed as a wide receiver 2. We've seen it in Tennessee in a run-first offense. He's had success. He's been around. He's the wide receiver 3. That's one of the better wide receiver 3s in the NFL. And some people might be thinking Corey Davis is the wide receiver 2, Elijah's the 3, or Elijah's the 1, and Garrett Wilson's the 3. I just don't understand that. This guy was taken in the top 10, Garrett Wilson. This is a very dangerous wide receiver group. I love the explosiveness from Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore. And it'd be one thing if the Jets just stopped there. They got the pass catching options for Zach Wilson. And after we hit on Michael Carter last year, we got him in the 4th round when we thought we could have taken him in the 2nd. And he played pretty well outside of getting hurt. We could have just been like, we'll take Michael Carter and have him and make him our RB1. They went and got Breece Hall, the best back in this class, or at least majoritively seen as the best back in this class. So everything about this offense and this offseason, and it's exactly what we knew the Jets were going to do coming into the year. It's all about supporting Zach Wilson. The Jets didn't only do that and accomplish that this offseason, they also upgraded their defense. I thought they had a fantastic offseason, and I know that's only so much. And I get that Zach Wilson could be bad, but that's what everybody else is thinking. What if they're wrong? What I know is when the surrounding environment changes, these quarterbacks change. And it's got to be top to bottom. There can't be any holes. I think Nate Tice says from The Athletic, you're only as good as your weakest link, especially on the offensive line. You can say that about probably every position group there, but you're maybe not so much, running back, but especially if in offensive line, you're only as good as your weakest link. And the Jets have a lot of pieces and a lot of plugs to fill holes. I'm not going to rely on my abilities to scout quarterbacks because I am a little bit, but in this case, I'm okay with being wrong. I haven't watched enough film to know whether Zach Wilson is truly bad or not. But if the offense can be good around him, maybe the scared feet go away with some confidence, So even if Mike White steps in, I like the pieces of this offense. And I like how Mike White played last year. But I think Zach Wilson could have some real success. The Jets here come with an asterisk. I do not think this is going to go well for them in terms of a win-loss record. There is a legitimate shot they are the worst team in the division record-wise, just simply because, I think Bill Belichick still holds a coaching advantage, and maximizing everything he's got. The biggest reason I don't think the Jets are going to do as well in the win-loss record is their schedule. They have a really, really rough schedule. They play some pretty good defenses in the first 10 weeks. They start the first 4 weeks playing the AFC North. Ravens, Browns, Bengals, Steelers. Ravens, I think, are a legit defense. Browns, I think, are an even more legit defense. Bengals retooled their defense. I think they're still good. Steelers, probably the weakest of the defenses there, but they have the Defensive Player of the Year. And Steelers' defense has always been good. Mike Tomlin defenses have always been good. That's a tough first 4 games. I could see them going 2-2 out of it, but in terms of fantasy production, there is some possibilities here that, things get slowed down, especially against the Ravens, the Browns, the Steelers. Then they play the Dolphins, another pretty good defense. Then they play the Packers, who I think are going to be the best defense in the league. They play the Broncos, Patriots, Bills, Patriots. It's a rough first, or is that 11 games? Yeah, it's a rough first 10 games. As I'm kind of thinking about it, some of these teams don't scare me that much. But I just do think that caveat is important because I do think, especially compared with the rest of the teams that I've talked about and will be talking about here today, the schedule, the toughness of the schedule for the Jets is by far and away more noticeable than any other team I will be talking about here today. So, biggest reasons why I think the Jets could be successful: misconception of a quarterback based off of people who don't know anything about what they're talking about quarterbacks. And it's the Jets, basically. So I'm okay with taking some shots on the Jets. The prices are definitely higher, but I think the number one price you should be looking at is like Zach Wilson. He's super cheap because everybody thinks he's not that good, and yet some of these guys are going really high. Now, Elijah goes in the sixth, Brees goes in the fifth, Garrett Wilson goes in like the 10th, Corey Davis goes in like the 14th, maybe. There's not a lot of. I guess it's not that expensive, so I'm kind of in on buying Jets players at their price tag right now. Um, the next two teams I would categorize as, let's just put it this way: if you watched Underdog's offensive ranking show, they ranked their favorite offenses from 1 to 32, basically in using what's that called, rank maker or something like that, tiers maker. They ranked the offenses, and in the hell tier, I think it was the Texans and maybe the Panthers. Panthers were at least I think were at least D or hell. Let's start with the Panthers first, because this is kind of what inspired this thought process here, this video. The Carolina Panthers, to me, I think are actually sneaky good. And it would not shock me if the Panthers wound up being the second best team in the division. And like on an astronomically improbable level, they could be the number one team in this division. That sounds outlandish. I get it. This all revolves, to me, around Matt Corral. Let's go back a couple of years. The Panthers are bought by David Tepper. New ownership, new direction. They go and hire Matt Rule as the head coach, a guy who has taken over programs in college and turned them around to be successful. It's rough. They're not that great, but I think they outperform expectations. I think their first 7 picks were defensive players. They've spent a lot of draft capital on this defense. They've got Brian Burns, who is scary good. Derek Brown. They just picked up Matt Ioannidis. Yetur Gross-Matos, they drafted in the second round. I hope I'm saying that right. They went and got J.C. Horn. By the way, they were right. J.C. Horn, should they have taken a quarterback? Maybe. But they got J.C. Horn, and he's good. He got hurt. C.J. Henderson, Jeremy Chin, they were right on. They've hit on a lot of early round picks. DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey. This is before David Tepper got there. But the Panthers, over the last few years, Brian Burns, Derek Brown, I think is still good. We're just waiting to see it. Shaq Thompson, Jeremy Chin, JC, they've been right. I think they have talent around the quarterback. I think this defense is very good. CJ Henderson's a first round pick. If JC Horn comes back healthy, this secondary is pretty dang good. And I think they've got some pass rush ability. Not a lot. I would like to see Hassan Reddick be here and be back. But, he got paid in Philly. But let's talk about this offense. Okay, the number one weakness of this offense is obviously the quarterback. We'll get to that here in a minute. Let's just first talk about the surrounding pieces, and that's what I talked about with the Jets. And the Giants, the surrounding pieces around the quarterback. I think a lot of the perception of these offenses is tied to the perception of the quarterback itself. Okay, in this case, or in the Jets' case, I think it's a misconception of the talent of the quarterback. In this situation here for the Panthers, which we'll get to here in a second, I'll talk about this more in a second, but I think it's a misunderstanding of who the quarterback is. So let's just first talk about the players, okay? This offensive line was rough last year, and probably its biggest weakness, and, probably why Sam Darnold eventually fell apart. It was bad. Now they go and they pick up, honestly, a lot of guys. They had one talented guy in Taylor Moton. He's pretty talented. I think he's, average to above average, which is good. but nothing special, right? And nothing special anywhere else. Brady Christensen's okay, I guess, but they go and get Bradley Bozeman, who played center for the Ravens last year. We know how the Ravens are. If the Ravens are right, Panthers are probably right here. They go and pick up Austin Corbett, guard who used to play for the Browns and most recently played for the Rams. Very good guard. Then they go draft Ike Ekwonu, seen as one of the best tackles in this, as the best tackle in this class by a lot of people. I talked up about Evan Neal before. Ike is just as scary for different reasons. So all of a sudden, oh, let me finish. They get Cam Irving from Dallas, who could maybe fill in for Christensen, but he's a backup at least for Ike and Moden. They pick up Michael Jordan. Came from the Bengals, not that great, but he's not starting for you. He's your backup. Pat Elflein from the Jets. Once again, not starting for you, but he's your backup. They go and draft a guy in the 6th round. They have a lot of guys. They drafted Deontay Brown out of Alabama last year in the 6th round. They have some guys there that I think can support some quarterback play. I don't think I need to talk about the weapons too much. Sure, they don't have Curtis Samuel anymore, but DJ Moore is DJ Moore. He's an absolute baller, and we've seen great things from Robbie Anderson. Maybe Terrace Marshall takes a step. He doesn't have to. This team also has Christian McCaffrey, who I think is by far and away the best pass-catching running back, in the NFL. He's the best passing game weapon at running back in the NFL. And so all of a sudden you're looking at this offense and you kind of see like, oh, okay, I can see some pieces here. The problem with this offense is the quarterback, obviously. Sam Darnold is hot doo-doo. He's really bad. And I think the Panthers knew that coming into this offseason. They know Sam Darnold is not the guy. He's not the option. So they were kind of stuck. They don't have any draft picks. Their only 1st round pick is like at 6 or something. And they also need a tackle desperately bad. So they go get Ike. Okay, fine. Then they trade back, I think, into the 3rd round, and they go get this guy, Matt Corral. Now, this quarterback class was nothing to write home about. Night and day difference between this offseason's quarterback class versus last year's. But anything is better than Sam Darnold. And once again, I'm not going to rely on, myself as to what I think, good quarterback play is, at least for the moment. And I'm going to take a shot on the upside that Matt Corral could step in and play well. Mac Jones, for example, was perceived to be the worst, easily the 5th best quarterback of the 5 last year. I would say consensus. And he's obviously right now, he was the most NFL ready, and that means a lot and gives him a head start in the race of who's good and who's not. And I think is actually good. Matt Corral was actually the number one quarterback for a few analysts. I think most notably Chris Sims. I might have talked about this before. But Chris Sims has a really strong track record, I feel like, especially when things are, he goes against the grain a lot, but he also turns out to be right. He had Lamar Jackson as the number 1 quarterback when he was coming out, and he's picked a couple more. I don't remember who they were. I think he had Josh Allen. So he had Matt Corral as the number 1 quarterback. And there was not a lot of consensus around these quarterbacks. And so, yeah, Matt Corral was a 3rd round pick and he wasn't a 1st round pick. If he was so good, why wouldn't they take him at pick 6? But there's some hidden upside here with Matt Corral. You could be wrong about Matt Corral. One thing we know for sure is you are not going to be wrong about Sam Darnold, because we all know he's hot garbage. And I don't understand how people think Darnold is going to be the quarterback. Even if it comes into minicamp and he starts week 1, I think he's yanked by week 2. Why would the Panthers, with all of this talent and Matt Rule, who's on the hot seat, even consider keeping Sam Darnold in there when you've got Matt Corral ready to go? And Matt Corral enjoyed some success. And this offense wants to be run first. I think that's unfortunate. But I could see some success here in this offense. The biggest reason I'm, kind of touting this team here is the price tags, especially on Matt Corral. It's so cheap. These guys are in one quarterback leagues. These guys aren't even getting drafted. But in in super flex leagues like the puppy that just filled, these guys were getting drafted and they were so cheap. They were so cheap, and yet I think if Matt Corral steps in, I think there's going to be some success in this offense. And I think there's just going to be some success for this team overall. They're definitely better than the Falcons. I'm sorry. It's not even close. So, of the teams here, I think this is probably my favorite because of mainly Matt Corral and how cheap he is. But I just think the disdain that the general public has for this team matched with, basically the difference between what I think and what everybody else thinks, this might be one of my more favorite offenses. Let's talk about the last one here. And, you got to kind of at some point pick one of the really, really bad ones to talk about. And so I'm going to talk about the Houston Texans. There is a common theme amongst each of these teams here, and it's offensive line. Offensive line plus, perceived quarterback play, I think, is the biggest reason why these offenses are mispriced. The Texans fall into this category just the same. The offensive line has improved immensely, immensely. Laramie Tunsil is Laramie Tunsil. He's been good since he was at Miami. Titus Howard was a first-round pick a few years ago. I don't know if he's anything fantastic, but he's good enough, I think. And they've readjusted the interior of this offensive line. Justin Britt coming over from San Francisco. Okay, I think that's interesting. AJ Cann, once again, I don't think he's anything amazing, but I think he's good enough coming over from Jacksonville. And Kenyon Green. There was about a 50-50 split on whether Kenyon Green or Zion Johnson was the best guard coming out of this class, but it was those two guys far and away. The weapons aren't that great. Brandon Cooks is good. Brandon Cooks scares me in fantasy simply due to concussions. I'm afraid he's going to get another concussion and he could just stop playing. But he was good last year. He on an awful offense, and even worse offense. And so I think he could be still just fine. Nico Collins could take a step. They drafted John Mechie. He didn't get a lot of love in the pre-draft process, but taken in the second round. Greg Cosell is a big fan of him. He does have the torn ACL. Similar to Jameson, but he tore it earlier than Jameson, I believe. And, look, I understand that Marlon Mack is the first name we see here at running back. And then we see Rex Burkhead. I do think there's something to Dameon Pierce. But this team wants to run the ball more. And they've built an offensive line that I think can support competent quarterback play, and we saw that from Davis Mills last year. Davis Mills is a very prototypical style quarterback, I think. He's kind of almost reminds me of Mac Jones light in terms of how he carries himself, his style of play, I guess, pocket passer. But he's got some mobility to him, just like Mac kind of does a little bit. But I think he's got a stronger arm than Mac does. And so, I think there could be some success here. Look, you got to pick some teams here, and I've gone over 5. Do I expect all 5 of these teams to do well? No, no, I don't expect all 5 of these teams to do well. But I think, if you align with any of with any of the thinkings that I've protruded from my mouth so far with any of these teams, then, take it for what it's worth. But I think this team is more likely to succeed than, say, like the Falcons, who have the big names in terms of the weapons. The Bears, who are just god awful. They have the probably the better quarterback. But I think if the Texans' offense was better than the Bears, it would not shock me in the slightest at all. I think the Texans are probably picking in the top 5 next year. Although they did, yeah, they're probably, I mean, maybe they're probably for sure top 10. If they weren't in the top 5 next year, it wouldn't shock me too much. If the Falcons are in the top 5 next year, it doesn't shock me at all. If the Bears are in the top 5 next year, it doesn't shock me at all. So, with this Texans team, I know it's really, really bad, but that's what everybody expects, right? Like, if we go to, Houston, the first player getting taken is probably Brandon Cooks in the 5th round, 4th round, whatever that is, 5th round. And nobody else after that really getting drafted. And I get it. Like, I don't know if I necessarily want any of these players other than maybe Davis Mills, because this defense is still going to be bad. They don't have enough pieces yet, and they could be throwing. And so maybe I buy into just this offense in general. So, I think it's rough. I'm not like happy about it, but if I got to take like a late dart on somebody, especially in a 2 quarterback league, I'm definitely not against Davis Mills. We just basically want to take advantage of late round miscalculations, for late prices, because you're not investing a lot. And I think there can be something to gain there. Just in terms of like a risk reward analysis. One of the reasons I've kind of got this idea is something I'm still kind of working on, thinking about. I don't know what I'm calling it yet, but hinge point drafting. And it's a strategy that should affect both roster makeup and roster building. So basically finding players that, I think fit a particular this particular context where they're being mispriced simply due to perception. And if you can take them, assuming you are right in that sense, rather than having player takes, but assuming you're right about the misconception of this offense, then I think you can take advantage of ADP, number one, and take advantage of those miscalculations by the general populace. But more importantly, I think it can affect how you build a roster. So let me kind of talk about this here a little bit. I'll give you a little peek into some of the teams I've drafted for the Puppy But Superflex. Let's talk about Matt Corral first. So if we believe that Matt Corral is a player that will start and could be semi-successful, then Matt Corral to me allows you to build a roster with only 2 quarterbacks and allow him to be your QB2. In this case, I had the 101. I took Josh Allen. I was already going to be, somewhat hero QB strategy here. It's something I like to do if I take a quarterback early, is I'll take the quarterback early and then kind of piece together what my second quarterback is going to be with like a few different non-sexy options. But Matt Corral, to me, instead of forcing me to take 3 QBs with the 2 others other than Josh Allen being 2 that I don't feel great about, if I feel comfortable with Matt Corral, I can take 2 quarterbacks, and that allows me to shotgun my running back position as well as my wide receiver position. Same thing here with like Jonnu Smith. Like if I think Jonnu Smith is better than what people are pricing him for right now, and he's so cheap, like that at least gives me an advantage of knowing, okay, I just need to take 2 tight ends. And if I'm right, then it allows me more options at the running backs and wide receivers. The same can be true, for example, if you're going hero QB and you think a quarterback is mispriced simply because a quarterback one is mispriced as a quarterback two. And so someone for me like Mac Jones, this is when the puppy first started. Mac Jones is going way, way earlier than this now. Um, this is when the puppy first started, but I was able to get Mac Jones in like the eighth round. That allowed me personally to think like, okay, I think people are assuming Mac Jones is not a quarterback one. I think he has the possibility of being a quarterback one, so I'm going to keep him as my hero quarterback and really just take the advantage, especially in these super flex leagues, of hammering running back and wide receiver early in the draft and getting just these absolute baller super teams. To me, I really love this strategy. Um, in terms of how you should address quarterback. And I think just in terms of drafting, I love this strategy in terms of building your roster. Um, so, and I just saw another team like this, very similar. There's Jared Goff at pick 75, and he's my hero quarterback. So I like this idea here, in we're attacking the general public's misassessment of the range of outcomes of a particular player. And most often, I think it's the ceiling perspective. Um, but that's kind of what I've been formulating here, and why I kind of got this idea about like, I think the Panthers are better than people expect. Um, and that's why I'm okay with taking Matt Corral as like my QB2. Whether this is a super flex or a one quarterback league, you could go a second quarterback and go Matt Corral, and you'd feel good about having a backup for whatever one quarterback you took in the middle rounds. Um, I'm gonna stop there because I think I've been talking for too long. I didn't even do a draft video, and I feel like I've talked for an hour. I probably have, and I apologize for doing so. I just get excited with some of this stuff and get kind of lost in the sauce. If you have listened up to this point, I truly do appreciate you. Shout out to Mike and Sean if you're listening. Thank you for listening. So if I haven't said this already, I kind of lost my train of thought. Subscribe, comment, do whatever you want to. Leave a rating. I don't know. Is that a thing on YouTube? Who knows? Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.